Many Rides here on the Too Many Rides channel in the Too Many Rides garage. You know, we've gotten to 500 videos. First one was in 2009. But there's much older videos on the channel. Refurbishing footage from the 90s, 2000s. You should be keeping an eye out for more videos. Pushing these buttons that YouTube gives you. It's time to get back to the 96. The 96 is the one I'm putting together out of all the worst parts I can dig up. It's time to get the 96 wired. And once again, we're going to use the worst parts I can find that are still serviceable. In looking through my parts bin, I've already narrowed down some of the electrical components I need to put on the bike and the wires and stuff down to some candidates, and I need to segregate that even further. So I've got this bin of stuff and I need to take a look at it and see what I can do. Okay, here's a majority of the components I need for the 1996 xr600r, made out of the worst parts. In no particular order, I'm going to go through here and choose which ones I'm going to put on the bike. I'm using a stock regulator, yet it has a Ricky stator in the motor, which I should take out, but I don't want to pull the side cover, so I'm just going to use one leg of it. And the difference there is the stock OEM stator puts out 80 watts, and 1/2 of a high output Ricky stator is 100 watts. I don't know if this can handle it, but I'm going to put it together and try. I've got 4 candidates here. One's from the 1991, one's from the 2000 xr600r number 1, one's from Nikki. No, not from Nikki. One is, I don't even know where all of them came from. To the best of my knowledge, they're all good working units. Since it's a matter of putting the worst parts on the bike, I guess at this point, I'll just choose the dirtiest one. And this one's dirty, I'll have to clean it up. It's got good terminals. This one's got something written on the terminals, but I don't know what that says. Terminals look okay. If the one I choose doesn't work, I'll just put on a different one. So I'm choosing the dirty one. The other 3 back in the parts supply bin. That's the one we're going to use. Now when it comes to CDIs, there's 3 available to choose from. I got one from the 1991. You remember the 1991. It's been decommissioned. Here's a dirty one. It's the dirtiest one out of the bunch. This might have come off of XR2000 number 1. I don't know, it's not marked. So let's mark it. XR2000 number 1. I'm not going to use it even though it is the dirty one. I'm trying to use the parts off of the 1991 Tracker project. You remember the Tracker project, don't you? Well, I have the whole wiring harness and components off that bike, which I know was running. And I'm trying to use up any parts that were on the Tracker project. And that's the one we're going to use. So we'll set that off to the side. Now we're going to need a coil. I've got a few coils here to choose from. And remember, we're looking for the worst parts. This coil came off of the nickel bike, which we used as a donor to fix Tommy Two-Tone. And I gotta say, I don't really like it. I don't like the L-shaped spark plug cap. There's a slight crack in here in the rubber, but that's serviceable. I know it's a working unit. We've got the one from the 1991. You remember the 91, don't you? Okay, I thought you did. It's got a real old style boot cap. But wait a minute, there's one more we can take a look at here. This is the one off of the 1991 Tracker project. You remember the Tracker project, don't you? That's the one, I've already sold most all the parts off of that. And the engine's right there in the 1996. So I'm going to use the one out of the 1995 nickel-plated bike that we used to fix up Tommy Two-Tone. You remember that bike, don't you? The 95? I'm going to start out trying to use this. And so we'll put these aside back in the bin. Okay, we're going to need a headlight wire and a bulb. We're going to use an OEM headlight for an XR600R single filament. And I've already looked through my parts bin and narrowed it down to this one. Somebody's cut off the wires here and put on new terminals. So we'll use that. And we're going to need a tail light. I was at a loss for a tail light to put on it. It's just going to be OEM single filament. And what I've got here is a Western Power Sports unit, an aftermarket copy. Dual filament. I don't need that. I found a regular XR600R tail light bulb. It's a much simpler thing. OEM setup. It already has the seal here where it follows the groove in the fender, goes underneath the tail bag and hooks into the wiring harness near the shock. It's unmolested, still has all its integrity. I haven't checked to see that the bulb works, but I hope it does. If not, I can get a new bulb probably at an automotive store. It's kind of a custom little bulb. We're going to need a kill switch on the bike. And I was narrowing things down and I came up with this one. It's OEM and it's got full integrity, except it's missing the rubber booty over the top of the button. Since it's missing that, I'm going to use it. This may be off of 2000 number 1. You remember the 2000 number 1, don't you? Yeah, I got that bike with the motor out and the motor was blown, but it was a whole bike's worth of parts, and I've since sold the frame, I've used the wheels, I've used a lot of the parts. And so an XR600R is a really simple wiring harness. Here I have two unmolested XR600R wiring harnesses. Looks like this one's had some alterations. This must be off of that bike that came in for Tommy Two-Tone, so we could fix his bike. It has had the stator wires cut on it. So that tells me it's off of that bike that had the nickel-plated frame, because it came with a street legal kit on it, and it had an aftermarket regulator. Or this could be off of my 1991. You remember the 91, don't you? That's the one I rode for years and years, until the 2000 number 2 replaced it. In general, it's in good shape except for these altered wires. Got a little crack in the sheathing here. The wires that have been altered. Then we have another wiring harness which is probably off of 2000 number 1. This has no alterations at all. This is a great example of how your wiring harness should be. But that's good. It's dirty, but that's a good one. I don't want to use that. And the 91 is almost unaltered, so I don't want to use that. We want to use as many parts. Well, here's another one. What's this one off of? This could be off of the 96. Another wiring harness. It appears to be unaltered, but I'll save that. You know, I'm trying to use tracker parts. Stuff off of that 91 tracker. You remember the tracker project. Now this bike was set up to run the Ricky stator. It was set up to be street legal. Here's a flasher unit. He was going without a battery and had a capacitor ignition. Had the Trail Tech regulator. It's got a lot of extra wires on it because it had signals and everything. Here's the plan. We're gonna cut this whole thing open and extract the OEM system out of it. And then I'm going to use my extra harnesses to make sure that I copy the OEM system. And then I'll wrap it all back up with tape. It still does have a lot of the OEM wiring. I don't know exactly what I've got here until I open this up. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to open this thing up. Let's take a look and see what's inside. This wiring harness was on the 1991 tracker project, but I'm utilizing almost everything off of it, and I've sold the frame and wheels. It had inverted forks on it. I'm using the motor in this 96 project we're doing now. That tracker project belonged to a guy from Los Angeles who moved up into the Sierras here, and he had the bike for about 5 years, and it was a project he was working on, and he was doing a lot of nice work on it, but it was not my idea of anything I wanted to do or have. Then life changed, and his father got ill. So he ended up having to try to sell it. And he did sell it to me. I'm trying to get any OEM wiring out of it so I can make my own similar to OEM harness from it. We're building the 96 and it's going to go up for sale, but I'm trying to use all the worst parts I can find out of my bins. If something's a little scratched up, dented, or anything like that, then it's certainly a candidate. Being that we have a whole wiring harness here for a road legal application, I'm assuming it's got all the OEM stuff I need for a dirt bike. So I'm just stripping it all the way down, isolate the OEM stuff, and wire it back up, tape it back up. Okay, all this stuff had to do with his dashboard system of lights and switches and his new electrical system for charging and capacitor and his taillights and turn signals. None of that is going to belong on the 96 at all. None of that is OEM. What we're left with is remnants of the OEM system. And so what you can do is check that against a stock OEM harness. Let's compare. First of all, CDI. That's all intact. However, it's missing everything that went to the original rectifier and to the stator. You've got your two rectifier wires here. Black with red goes to CDI. You got a green for ground, and you have a brown, which is power supply. That actually goes to the headlight and tail light. It turns to blue inside the harness right about here at a T in the brown wire, and it turns to blue. The brown wire does go to your CDI, and it goes blue the rest of the way to the front. So I can see I've got to rebuild that. It's okay here, but it doesn't have this dog leg with the rest of the stuff needed. So I'll have to wire that in. And then as you go down the line, it does have the black with red stripe to go to the stator. So as you look at this, that wire's going to head that direction. You can see it's the same as that one. In order to hook in the stator, I'll need to utilize these two, and they go to your CDI. Once again, power and ground. It's blue with a white stripe on this one, and green a ground. It's all coming out of the CDI. Black with white, that's going to go to your kill button. Can't quite tell what color that is. It looks like it's black with green. So that's going to go to what on an original harness up front is your ground. So the black with white goes to your kill button, comes back out of the kill button and goes to ground. That's coming out of the CDI. Now down the line here, we've got intact OEM wiring for the pulse generator. And that's already on the motor, the other half of this plug. That's all good. No need to revamp that. And then you've got your coil. The coil's got the positive and negative, and for some reason I've got two grounds in here. What there is an extra wire. This black one is a second ground which doesn't belong in this system. So I'm just going to take that out of here for now. Coil wires are intact. So as you move down the line, once again, you've got your coil, you've got your pulse generator, and then the only thing we have going up to the headlight area is a wire, I assume. Okay, this was for kill switch. It's got an end we won't be using, so we'll take that off of there. Alright, so there you go. We have salvaged as much as we can, and I've got some rebuilding to do to bring it back to OEM. Let me go ahead and get those materials together, and we'll start to do that. Okay. After taking a look, seeing what I've got and what I don't got on the tracker wiring harness, I've come up with a plan, and it involves, okay, there's one, like I say, the coil and frame ground, pulse generator, all already done. But I'm having to add in, off of that ground from the frame, a green wire for the alternator and a green wire for the tail light. That should do it. Like an OEM harness. So now we still need to finish off the alternator circuit and power supply for the headlight and tail light. Okay, the big wiring session. We just got done revamping what was left of the harness off the tracker in order to make it into ready to go for a xr600r, except for I haven't put the plugs on the front for the headlight yet. I'm going to try it out on the bike with all the components on the bike. Before I finally wrap it with black tape, finish those last connections. Just kind of mocking it up to make sure it all fits. Okay, so now we have to put the regulator on. And we'll have to have a longer bolt than that. Spending my time looking for the worst bolts I can find. Okay, I've got some used tubing here. So that's one of my worst parts, because I have new tubing, but I'm not going to use that. Crazy. Put that old stuff on there. Okay, that's up front for the headlight. You got your plug into your kill switch, power your headlight, ground the kill switch and the headlight. Okay, I'm building a bike out of used parts, the worst parts out of the bin, but I have to fix some of them up in order to make them serviceable. This wouldn't be my first wiring harness choice on one of the bikes I ride daily, but it is a good unit for a OHV. It's the worst parts I've got out of the bin. There you go. Wiring harness. We're not done yet, but I'm getting tired. Starting to get hungry. There's more work to do, but I think I'll just leave it right there until tomorrow.